Everyone, it's the 25th of March, 2024. My name is Derek, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about yesterday's Australian Grand Prix and its winner Carlos Sainz, as well as the unexpected departure of Max Verstappen's #1 Red Bull car. So the big story was that Max Verstappen failed to tie his all-time Formula One record of 10 consecutive victories after suffering a fire with his rear brakes, forcing a retirement in the pit lane. This paved the way for Carlos Sainz to win his third ever Grand Prix, and remarkably, he did so just 2 weeks after suffering from appendicitis, where his appendix was removed. So, walking ginger at the event, but able to get behind the wheel and do the job. Now, on this channel, we talk about the remarkable world of synchronicity, especially through the language of numerology. And here, we take phrases like, there are no coincidences, or history repeats itself, to the absolute extreme. And I show that not only does synchronicity occur every day, but it manifests by a numerical code that seems to repeat itself across the world of sports, news, politics, and even our personal lives. And indeed, yesterday's race in Australia had a boatload of synchronicity that's worth exploring. Real quick, we'll be touching on the language of Gematria. The most basic cipher you see here, ordinal, assigns a number to each letter in the alphabet 1 through 26 relative to its position. Yesterday was Palm Sunday. And in Christianity, Palm Sunday celebrates Jesus' return to Jerusalem just before the Crucifixion. And in the alphabetic order, Jerusalem sums to 104. Every year right around Easter, and often on Palm Sunday, Formula One goes racing at Albert Park in Australia, which also sums to 104. And this year's race at Albert Park was by far the most intriguing so far in the F1 season, as Max Verstappen, who is on an unprecedented run of success in the sport, faced an unexpected early retirement, paving the way for Carlos Sainz to pick up his third career win. Max Verstappen entered the race having finished his last 43 Grand Prix that he began. And 43 is a very interesting number and an important one to Max, as we will see in a little bit. But check out how long this streak goes. All the way back to early 2022. He went almost in 2 full years before having another retirement. And notice how his last retirement was also at the Australian Grand Prix. This year, Max was running in second place when his car suddenly broke out in flames, forcing him to exit. In 2022, at the same race, Max was also running in second place when his car broke out in flames. That wasn't the only streak that Max was looking to extend yesterday, as he had entered the race with 9 consecutive wins. This was only the third time in history that a driver had won 9 straight. Max had won 10 last year. But 11 years ago, Sebastian Vettel, a German driver, had also won 9 consecutive races. And just like Max this year, who completed 3 laps before having to retire in the pit lane at the end of the 4th lap, Vettel's streak of 9 straight wins also ended in Australia at the 2014 Grand Prix, where he completed 3 laps and then also retired in the pit lane at the end of lap 4. 2 drivers going for their 10th consecutive win, failing at the same race 10 years apart. These 2 races also had something else in common. This year, Lewis Hamilton had to retire after an engine failure while changing gears. At the 2014 Australian race, Lewis Hamilton had to retire after an engine failure that was blamed on the gearbox. Lewis Hamilton happens to be the driver that Max Verstappen was chasing in his quest for most consecutive races finished. Next year, Lewis Hamilton will be moving to Ferrari, and I've been doing some work on the numerology of that. If you check the description below, you'll find a couple videos. Hamilton will be replacing Carlos Sainz, who was the winner of this year's race in Australia. It was Sainz's first Grand Prix victory since last year in Singapore, which was the last race that Max Verstappen didn't win. And there was a big similarity between those two races as well. In both races, Lewis Hamilton's current teammate, George Russell of Mercedes, crashed out on the final lap while trying to make an overtake. So both races ending under a yellow flag. So here's a look at what we call the base 4 methods of Gematria, which take names, words, and phrases and assign a numerical value to them. We primarily work in the ordinal and reverse methods, but we'll also take a look at the extended methods, called Latin, or Agrippa's key based on the ancient Latin alphabet, and also standard English Gematria, which uses the current alphabetic order a lot like ordinal. So let's talk about this 43 race streak that Max Verstappen had. Yesterday's race was a span of 191 days before Max Verstappen's next birthday. The number 191 is a prime number, divisible only by 1 and itself. And we see here that 191 is the 43rd prime number. Yesterday was also Verstappen's 191st involvement in a Formula One race, counting his backup and starts for the Red Bull organizations. In reverse reduction, the word brakes equals 43, and this is where the fire broke out from at the rear of his car. The name Max equals 43 in reverse, just like Red Bull, his team name, in reverse reduction, 43. This was the first time he had retired in 43 races. The word retired equals 43. Hamilton holds the longest streak. Notice how Hamilton equals 43. And later on, we'll see how this connects to Wilsdorf and the Bulldogs, both 43. But consider that this happened all on Palm Sunday. The name Jesus Christ equals 43 in reduction. And when it comes to Easter and Jesus Christ and the Crucifixion, perhaps no number is more significant than 33. And this was a big number with Carlos Sainz, the winner of the race. Notice how Carlos Sainz was born on a date with 33 numerology, and his birthday is a span of exactly 3 years and 30 days before Max Verstappen. Verstappen's brakes began smoking immediately after completing the third lap. Carlos Sainz got his third Grand Prix victory in the third week since his appendicitis surgery. Recall how Jesus rose during the third day. Crucifixion of Jesus Christ equals 303 in ordinal. So does Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And consider how the team principal of Red Bull Racing is named Christian. Christian Horner, who has been steeped in a lot of controversy lately due to a sexual assault allegation. Notice how the name Horner sums to 303 in standard. And the year 33 AD is when many Christians believe Jesus was crucified at the age of 33. When Max Verstappen first entered Formula One, He was driving the number 33 car. His full name, Max Emilian Verstappen, sums to 303 in the reverse alphabetic order. A lot of Christians believe that the crucifixion occurred on April 3rd of 33. Now, April 3rd is written 4/3, a lot like 43, the number we led this video off with. But perhaps more significant is that April 3rd is the 93rd day of the year. Notice how April 3rd has double gematria of 93 in Trigonal and Sumerian. Max Emilian Verstappen sums to 93 in standard reduction. Verstappen was even born on September 30th, the date written 9/30 here in the U.S. In ordinal, God's Son, Nazareth, and Crucifix, all 93. Christianity, 930 Sumerian. The first man in the Bible lives to age 930. There's also a strong revelation riddle here as well. Now, the second coming of Christ is told in the book of Revelation, written by John of Patmos. And this brings us to Latin gematria, which I think is the most important method. Notice how Patmos sums to 331. Revelation is the last book of the Bible. Last equals 331. And it's about the second coming. Second coming, 331. Just like God's Son, 331. Well, Max Verstappen is the son of another famous F1 driver, Jos Verstappen. And check out how Max Verstappen went from driving the number 33 car to the number 1 car, 331. In this same method, the name Max equals 331. And Max is a 3-time champion for Red Bull. Red Bull summing to 331. Well, this is another important number to Revelation because Revelation ends with verse 22:21. And 22:21 is the 331st prime number. So there's a big revelation riddle with Red Bull. Well, notice how Revelation sums to 1010. If you measure back from the date that Red Bull purchased Jaguar Racing back in 2004 to the date of yesterday's race, you get exactly 1010 weeks. So this racing team, its age matches the gematria of Revelation, 1010. This is also 7,070 days, and Red Bull makes energy drinks. Energy drinks equals 770. Yesterday was also a span of 10 months and 10 days after the anniversary of Verstappen's first ever career win. And not to get too sidetracked here, but that first career win at the Spanish Grand Prix, that happened on May 15th, or 515. The name Jesus equals 515. And that was the 136th day of a leap year, maxing Verstappen in ordinal. Verstappen also with birth numerology of 136. This Jesus riddle shows up in Red Bull principal Christian Horner, as you would expect, with a man named Christian. And the fact that he's been in the news for sexual assault allegations, kind of funny considering his last name is Horner. And someone accused him of being a little too horny at work, I suppose. But check out his birth numerology. Horner was born on a date with 119 numerology on November 16th, which is an upside down 9111. And this stands out because the 11th of September, 11/9 or 9/11, is the date that a lot of Christians believe Jesus was truly born. In fact, if you look at his full name, Christian Edward Johnston Horner, it sums to 151, just like Jesus Christ in ordinal. Christian Horner was born 15 months and 10 days after his wife, former Spice Girl, Jerry Halliwell. The name Christian Horner in Latin also sums to 603, just like JC, the initials of Jesus Christ. Notice how Jesus has matching gematria with Red Bull, 74 and 29. When Red Bull founded its racing organization in 2004, check out how old Christian Horner was. 11,322 days. Well, 322 is another significant number to Christianity, which is one of the Abrahamic religions. Notice how Abrahamic religions sums to 322 in reverse. And this brings us to the next part of the decode. Every year, the Australian Grand Prix is sponsored by Rolex. The founder of Rolex was Hans Wilsdorf. And Hans Wilsdorf was born on March 22nd, or 322. So let's dive into this 322 riddle with Lewis Hamilton. Now, if you caught my video exploring Hamilton's move to Ferrari, you would have seen this. The name Lewis Hamilton has 322 gematria in this mirrored cipher. When Lewis Hamilton's engine failed yesterday at the Grand Prix, he was 14,322 days old. Remember earlier, he announced a move to Ferrari. The founder of Ferrari, Enzo Ferrari, his name equals 322, with capital letters taken into account. Capitals mixed, maintaining the alphabetic order. With that method reversed, you get a 322. This week's winner, Carlos Sainz. His full name, in Latin ordinal, sums to 322. Sainz, a Spaniard, Spanish very close to Latin. Well, notice how yesterday was also 12,322 weeks after Great Britain claimed Australia back in 1788. And that's relevant because Lewis Hamilton is from Great Britain. He suffered a blown engine yesterday, which sums to 11/18. Well, the date 11/18 is the 322nd day of the year. Also notice how the digits in Lewis Hamilton's age are almost identical to the digits in Hans Wilsdorf's age for the race, 1432. But check this out. If you measure from his date of birth to the race, you get 143 years in 3 days. Well, the number 1433 is a prime number, the 227th prime number. Australian Grand Prix sums to 227 in ordinal. Hans Wilsdorf's numerology has a lot more to do with this than you might think. Notice how Wilsdorf died on the 188th day of a leap year. Both Australian Grand Prix and Albert Park Circuit, the site of the race, both sum to the 188th prime number. Wilsdorf was born on a date with 124 numerology and then died on a date with 92 numerology. Well, check out the gematria of Australian Grand Prix, 92 and 124. The name Lewis equals 1,024, but the name Hamilton sums to 92 and 124. Now, as I mentioned in my last video on Princess Kate, this is all going on as the team from Yale, the Bulldogs, advanced in the NCAA men's tournament for just the second time in school history. And notice how Bulldogs equals 92 and 124. This is all relevant because 322 circles back to the Skull and Bones Society, which is headquartered at Yale, which is currently 322 years old. And again, Yale University finding success in the basketball tournament, all while this goes down. So, back to Hans Wilsdorf. Here we're looking at the age of Hans Wilsdorf, born on March 22nd and dead on July 6th. Well, here's something else that's very, very interesting about that. March 22nd and July 6th. The Georgia Guidestones, which is closely associated with Skull and Bones, as I explored in my video on the Super Bowl this year, the Georgia Guidestones opened on March 22nd and were destroyed on July 6th, the same exact two dates. And this is pretty alarming considering that Lewis Hamilton's teammate is named George. George W. Bush, the former president, born on July 6th, meaning that the Guidestones collapsed on his 76th birthday. So another riddle with a guy named George connected to the Georgia Guidestones. So, Hans Wilsdorf died 106 days after his birthday, but that's not it. Wilsdorf was also exactly 1,060 sidereal months or lunar orbits old. The name Wilsdorf sums to 106 in the alphabetic order. Wilsdorf was born 5,416 weeks before Lewis Hamilton, exactly. And in the alphabetic order, Lewis Hamilton sums to 160. In yesterday's race, Hamilton retired during the 16th lap. He was unable to complete his 16th lap. Next year, Lewis will be driving for Scuderia Ferrari, or Scuderia Ferrari, I suppose, which sums to 106. The winner of yesterday's race, Carlos Sainz, sums to 160. Hamilton's teammate Russell, who crashed out in the final lap, his name also equals 106. And notice how Carlos Sainz was born 160 weeks before Max Verstappen. Sainz Jr. equals 1,060. Verstappen equals 160 with reverse caps. Verstappen retired due to an issue with his brakes, which equals 106. This was also the 106th week since his last retirement. Or the 106th week, I mean, since Ferrari's last 1-2 victory. It's one of the two, but notice how the other driver for Ferrari, Carlos Sainz's teammate, Charles Leclerc, drives the number 16 car. And Charles Leclerc was even born on the 16th day of the month. Also, Charles Leclerc was born 16 days before Max Verstappen. I'm sorry, after. The name Max equals 16. And the Grand Prix yesterday was 160 days after Charles Leclerc's birthday. 16, another number connected to Yale. Yale celebrates its anniversary on the 282nd day of the year. The Brotherhood of Death has this 282 gematria. Well, yesterday's race was the date leaving 282 days on the calendar. And not only does Lewis Hamilton equal 1282 in Latin. But if you take his full name, Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton, it also sums to 282 in the alphabetic order. Carlos Sainz sums to 884, which is very close to Skull and Crossbones, which equals 885. Carlos Sainz was born during lunation 886. So I guess if you average these numbers, you get the 885. This was Ferrari's first 1-2 victory since March 22nd of 2022. And that date is kind of like a 3-2-2 riddle, right? 3-2-2-2-2. And this was the 106th week since then. But this was the 1104th Grand Prix, and Ferrari equals 114, getting the big 1-2 on the podium. Before I end this video, I quickly want to talk about Ollie Bearman, who was the driver who stepped in to take Carlos Sainz's place in the last Grand Prix back in Saudi Arabia 2 weeks ago. So once again, the story is that Carlos Sainz had appendicitis, which means he needed a replacement driver, and that replacement did pretty well, ended up finishing 7th, and scored, I think, like 6 points for Ferrari. Ollie Bearman is heavily coded by the numbers, and I'll talk more about this in another video, but check out how Bearman was born 3,902 days after Carlos Sainz. Scuderia sums to 392. Scuderia Ferrari, the official team name. If you include the end date, these drivers were also born 3,903 days apart. Well, the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix was on the date 3-9 or 9-3. Appendicitis equals 390 in Latin. Ollie Bearman was born 309 days after Sebastian Vettel's birthday, and the name Vettel equals 930. This is relevant not only because of what I mentioned earlier, Vettel, the other man to win 9 straight races, but Sebastian Vettel was Ollie Bearman's hero all the way back when he was 6 years old. In Latin Gematria, Saudi Arabian Grand Prix equals 1019. Well, Oliver Bearman was born during Brown lunation number 1019. That's the 171st prime number. Appendix removed equals 171. These two Ferrari drivers were also born 10 years, 250 days apart. And the reason he took over was appendicitis, which equals 125. Bearman was born 1 month and 25 days before Vettel's birthday. Lewis Hamilton announced his move to Ferrari during lunation 1250. And the driver he will be replacing, Carlos Sainz, his full name equals 1250 in Satanic. Scuderia Ferrari, 250 reverse. So if you want to see more on that, check out the links down in the description. As always, you'll find previous videos on related material, particularly Lewis Hamilton, this F1 and Cars riddle that's been playing out ever since Hamilton's career began, all the way back in 2008. All right, everyone, that'll do it for this video. Peace, love, God bless. We'll talk to you all next time. See ya.